Dragon Ball, Naruto, and Fairy Tail. The true big three are all major names of the Shounen battle genre, and personally having experienced all three, I can say they are quite good, and I'm a fan of each. Yes, even Fairy Tail. All of these fine series ended years ago, or at least they would have. If not for the corporate machine, they can't seem to let a good thing go, can they? Not until they wring it dry and beat every penny out of its decaying body.
He's already dead!
The following video will be reviewing and contrasting 3 sequel series: Boruto Naruto Next Generations, Dragon Ball Super, and Fairy Tail 100 Years Quest. The 3 particular examples I chose today are different from other series like the different parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, or for a more recent example, the 7 Deadly Sins sequel, 4 Nights of Apocalypse. These 3 are different because the original mangaka are not the artists behind these series. These 3 series have new artists at the wheel. Now in all 3 examples, the original mangaka Masashi Kishimoto, Akira Toriyama, and Hiro Mashima all have a hand in writing and or storyboarding their respective sequels to some degree. But the bulk of the work, i.e. the drawing and illustrating, is done by former assistants to the original mangaka. Mikio Ikimoto for Kishimoto, Atsuo Ueda for Mashima. Toyotaro's case is a bit different as he had been drawing spin-offs for Dragon Ball for quite some time before taking up Dragon Ball Super, and was a fan artist even before that. Now I don't want to compare the sequels too much to the originals, and not just because they have yet to conclude and can easily become better or worse as they go, but comparing the sequels to the originals is inevitable, as they are benefiting from concepts and characters established by the originals. So let's swallow the hard pill right now. As it stands, none of these series are as great as their originals. It's almost unfair to compare them because these IPs are absolute titans, each unmistakable landmarks. Dragon Ball being one of the largest media franchises in history, Naruto being a huge staple of anime communities in the West and being part of the illustrious Big 3. And yes, even Fairy Tail, whether you like it or not, that series has had a lasting impression on the community and has had a fair share of popularity. The reason these 3 artists were chosen for the job was not because they distinguished themselves as talents the same way their predecessors did. They were chosen because they closely worked with and could best replicate their respective predecessors' art styles, which I imagine must be a bit of a pickle for them. They can't stray too far from the original art style to keep the brand recognizable, and that leaves them open to direct and inevitable comparisons to their predecessors, who have developed and honed that style for decades. I can't imagine it's an easy situation to live in, even if one was a technically stronger illustrator than their predecessor. So to begin, let's start off by looking at the artwork for each series, starting with Boruto. I'm sad to report that Boruto does not look amazing. Okay, don't want to discredit Ikimoto, but I struggle and labor to find pages that I think are super cool or interesting to look at. There are some decent pages to be sure, but the majority of it just doesn't leave a strong impression on me, and I can't find anyone else particularly enthusiastic about the artwork. That said, the volume covers are really nice. I like the poppy bright color choices. It's something the original Naruto series never did, and it really stands out. But overall, I don't think Boruto's art is going to be a major draw for anyone. I've heard it said that the art for the original Naruto series was never amazing, so this is okay. But I have to very strongly disagree. Even if Kishimoto wasn't the best illustrator technically, there's no shortage of iconic character designs, breathtaking color spreads, and memorable imagery in the original Naruto run. The Akatsuki robe didn't become a hot cosplay item for nothing. It's because that shit looks dope, and if you wear one, you will immediately feel like an anime villain. Moving on, Dragon Ball Super's art has more noteworthy pages to be sure, both in a positive and negative sense. This page, man, oh man, I cackle like a dumbass every time. I think people who say digital art isn't real art are dumb, but this is definitely the kind of page people will use to discredit the practice. Many people have also criticized Toyotaro's anatomy, which personally I feel isn't as important in an over-the-top alien martial arts series, but I do think it's a valid criticism for those that care. But credit where it's due, Toyotaro can draw some pretty great pages. In fact, at his best, he may even rival Toriyama, if only for a page or two. I'm especially fond of the last few chapters of the Moro fight. I love the way Moro stretches the ground into a face and how stunning Goku's new Ultra Instinct technique is. It's a really memorable page. The character designs for the major characters also come out looking pretty appealing across the board. Honestly, I hate harping on and scrutinizing any mangaka's art because the more I learn about manga serialization, the more I understand how harsh and cutthroat the industry is. It's not even uncommon for the harsh conditions to kill an artist over a long enough period. But even detached from all that, these are strong artists. I'm mostly compelled to pick it apart here because the standards the predecessors set were so high, and because Boruto and Super are monthly releases, meaning an average of 50 pages per month schedule. Now, it's not hard and fast rule, but typically the more time an artist has, the better their work turns out. See how Araki from JoJo's Bizarre Adventures art tends to be sharper when he's on a monthly schedule. Most monthly manga that I've seen usually have much more compelling art than Boruto and Super. In fact, a lot of my favorite looking manga are monthly releases. It might be unfair, but I'll flash some examples here, not even big double page spreads, just average pages. One reason why the artwork in Super might be lacking is because Toyotaro doesn't use assistants, meaning he has to carry the whole workload himself, which is pretty admirable. I've tried to find information on assistants for Boruto and Quest, but couldn't. It wouldn't surprise me if they had little to no help from assistants similar to Toyotaro, but I can't find anything one way or the other. Speaking of Quest, let's get to its artwork. 100 Years Quest looks pretty good. I have a folder on my phone of cool manga dragons, and 4 of them are from 100 Years Quest. The quality for Quest is much more consistent across the board and has much more frequent highs. It might even be better than early Fairy Tail's art in a few ways. The release is bi-weekly, meaning an average of 40 pages a month over 2 chapters, so it might technically be a bit less work a month than Boruto and Super, but not by a whole lot, and yet the artwork is head and shoulders above the other two. I love the dragons. Oh my god, I love the dragons. I've linked to a dragon video in the description. Watch that, yeah. The locations and backgrounds are far more interesting in most cases. I especially love the city on the palm of the wood dragon. The magic at its best is wonderful, and unlike the other 2 series, the girls are hot. Sadly, not as hot as Mashima's though. If I had to criticize Quest's artwork, then I'd say the fan service is weaker. Fairy Tail is notorious for its bodacious fan service, so it's kind of disappointing it doesn't deliver on that nearly as well as the original series. I think it has to do with how the female characters are drawn less curvy and more rounded, if that even makes sense. But that's just an art style. As we'll talk about later, Quest delivers on the fanservice in different ways. Is that ominous enough? Ooh. And that brings us to the writing/story. As you are all well aware, Boruto is about the son of your favorite anime hero, which actually makes it unique next to Super and Quest because those 2 series keep the same core cast while Boruto has a new Team 7 to take the lead. Or at least they try, because Naruto and Sasuke end up stealing the show fairly often. Whenever there's a huge spike of attention towards Boruto's manga or its anime, you can bet it's because of Naruto and Sasuke. Honestly, some people have wondered why the sequel series wasn't just about Naruto and Sasuke bringing peace to the ninja world or something. It's only natural. After all, fans of the original series have more reason to be interested in the adults from the original series than they do the kids who haven't had time to grow on them. When it comes to Boruto's new characters and plot, they take some time to pick up steam. But because of that, it takes some ambitious and dramatic turns. If you love the theme of ninja trying and failing to become perfect tools, then you might like seeing how technology plays a role in Boruto, and the character of Koji. Or if you want to see Naruto use chakra to connect with people in non-violent ways like the Sage 6 Paths intended, here it is. If you want to learn more about the Otsutsuki lore, there's plenty of that in Boruto, and that eventually leads to Boruto possibly dying and being replaced and possessed by one in the future. I suspect this will result in Boruto having a relationship with Momoshiki similar to Naruto and Kurama, which can be interesting. While I can't say I'm terribly interested in every new character, I can say with certainty I'm invested in where Kawaki's story goes. He has a nice character arc in the works, and his relationship with Naruto and Boruto is very compelling and even heartwarming at times. I really wasn't expecting that. Boruto easily has the best emotional highs of these 3 stories. While I can safely say Boruto has the highest highs, I can't help but feel my interest fluctuate and wade while reading the series, on a moment-to-moment basis. I'm interested in the broad strokes, but I struggle to get invested in the details. I don't think it's because Boruto is a weak protagonist necessarily. A lot of people don't like his standoffish attitude and discontent towards his father, but I think that was easily the best route to take the character. Fans of the original show rightfully get annoyed at his privileged perspective, and newcomers slowly discover alongside Boruto how cool his dad actually is. It also gives Boruto a unique disposition because everyone, both inside the story and outside of it, love and adore Naruto to death. If Boruto was the same, he'd be all the easier to overlook in favor of his father. I think my interest fluctuates so much because of the fight scenes and antagonists are pretty weak, I think. But even if I lose interest in keeping up with all these series, I'm always going to keep an eye on Boruto going forward out of curiosity, because it still takes more ambitious turns than Super and Quest. Dragon Ball Super and Quest take a safer route than Boruto and a more linear one, and they may be better off for it for the most part. They stick to the core characters and keep a more consistent, straightforward appeal. But instead of being about cute side adventures, they become linear progression of their stories and make the world bigger in that classic power escalation fashion. Quest introduces 5 new antagonists as strong as Fairy Tail's endgame boss within its opening chapters, and Super, do I even need to explain it, they're in multiverses now. Most fans of Dragon Ball care most about the action and interplay between characters than they do the events of the plot. After all, simplicity can help a story thrive when it knows what it wants to do. And the interplay between characters is something Super does not neglect. Not only in having Vegeta's skill set diverge from Goku, giving him his own path to blaze, but in terms of raw writing intrigue, I feel Super most excels in its major antagonists, mainly Jiren and Moro, both acting as sorts of composites and logical extremes of ideas fostered in the original run of Dragon Ball. A lot of what I'm about to say regarding Jiren is mostly my experience with the anime. The manga adaptation of the Tournament of Power is a much shorter and condensed version of that story, so it actually doesn't give much to work with. That's probably a big weakness for Super, in that the anime version of the Tournament of Power is a fun set of action set pieces given a large amount of time, and a large sense of scope befitting of a tournament involving multiple universes. The manga just hits the key points in like 5 chapters or so, and because of that I think it ends up being one of the weakest arcs in the manga, because it all just breezes by you. Getting back to Jiren, the skinny of it is that he's a portrait of Goku's former ideal of strength. An ideal of one impeccable fighter that can defeat any opponent alone. An ideal that he may have been trying to push onto Gohan in the Cell arc. And one that is ultimately faulty, because in good old Dragon Ball fashion, there's always someone stronger than you, and you should always be competing with yourself. Also, the power of friendship isn't too bad either.
Goku! You've got this! Fight!
Win! Dance for us, monkey.
While Moro is a bizarre mashup of various antagonists and their nastier traits, mainly to pull out and examine Goku's morality. Now, the one thing that intrigued me most while reading these series is in how their fan service and some writing decisions are almost like something out of a fanfic, but in a good way. I find that fans love diving into underexplored characters and concepts that the original work had little interest in. It can go to show that what the author thinks is interesting about their story won't always completely align with what the fans find interesting. A lot of decisions in the sequel feel like they're direct responses to the original series. The first example I want to talk about is Goku's morality. There's a strange contrast between Goku's morality as a child and that of an adult that has opened some weird arguments over the years. Mysteria Fusion's Dragon Ball Dissection series goes into this in greater detail, link in the description. But long story short, Kid Goku wants to save people for no other reason than to be kind, and adult Goku will do whatever it takes to get that good fight. Possibly even endangering innocent people or his friends to get it. Oh yeah. Vegeta-sama, I just killed Bulma, will you give me a good fight now, Vegeta-sama? Vegeta-sama, yes, fight me, Vegeta-sama! There's never a clear trigger or explanation of Goku's moral compass in the late stages of Dragon Ball as far as I'm aware, and Super's Moro arc wishes to address this, with the climax laying bare an explanation of Goku's mindset and thought process in these world-ending situations. It's kinda surreal, but in a nice way. If you want to go deeper into that discussion, I'll link a few videos dedicated to Super's story or Goku's character. Another example, and my favorite example of this retroactive criticism / fan service, is in 100 Years Quest's Alderaan arc. Here, the background characters from the Fairy Tail Guild actually play a substantial role and have a meaningful impact on the conclusion of that arc. Fairy Tail loved spouting how important the guild was and how every member was like a member of a family. And yet most of that family was obviously unimportant and not the focus of anything. Lots of readers were disappointed or thought there was a clear dissonance with the framing here. But for the first time it's meaningfully addressed. And it's a good time too, considering it's relevant to a new character's backstory. I'm not sure if these decisions were the result of Ueda and Toyotaro bringing an outsider's perspective, or if Mashima and Toriyama simply felt the sequels made for a good opportunity to try and address these criticisms. The second way Quest does this is in Lucy's relationship with combat. In the original series, Lucy was introduced as an inexperienced novice mage, Her role in most story arcs was predominantly to show what can be accomplished without magic power, or at least without abundant magic power. As a result, she would end up underperforming in many solo combat encounters. With some exceptions, but still, she got beat up a whole lot. After all, if she was shown to be as powerful a mage as her comrade, she wouldn't be the best character to illustrate that a weakling isn't worthless. But as the series goes on, Lucy accomplishes some pretty amazing things. If you put on your power scaling glasses, you'll see she's more than capable of defeating middling opponents. Quest, being a sequel series, starts fresh, and Lucy doesn't necessarily have to perfectly fit that role anymore. She ends up getting more of her own fights, and it's pretty neat. One of her opponents is even a musclehead who has nothing but raw power at her disposal, making me believe it's deliberately drawing attention to Lucy's lack of raw power next to the other characters. A smaller way fanservice is used in Fairy Tail is to solidify the romances between the cast, which in some cases was left open-ended or unexplored at the end of the series. Mainly through having Gray and Juvia and Urza and Jalal respectively do couple things. It's nice, it's cute, it's good for aiming at what it wants to give. Another thing Quest does is change the presentation of its titillating fan service. Oh boy, we're at the fun part now. There's still fun new outfits on the cover pages, and the girls are still beautiful of course, but it's less about dedicating a chapter to a swimsuit competition, and more about seeing Juvia turn tiny and jump into Gray's mouth. Or seeing Lucy and Urza turn into monster girls, or seeing Lucy get stuck in a wall, or seeing Wendy get tied up, beaten by a hulking madman, and then getting his sticky stuff forced down her throat. Also, Jalal BDSM is in there somewhere. The fanservice feels more fetishistic in Quest. Not to say Fairy Tail never did this kind of stuff before, but these types of scenes definitely feel more frequent. That Wendy one in particular was so hilariously extreme in hindsight, but pretty uncomfortable on the first read. And it might not be the last one, seeing how in the latest chapter, Wendy's current opponent is another animalistic dude with a crush on her. And that's just the sexual and character-based fanservice. I haven't even mentioned Nasha yet. Although if I want to talk about kids, I might as well switch back to Boruto. I'm gonna be straight with you. I don't care much about a lot of the kid characters in Boruto. They strike me as cynical attempts to fuse the original cast with some underwhelming and predictable results. All of their personality traits and design details are taken from their parents and just mashed together. Or in some cases you can just get mini versions of the parents. Shikadai is just Shikamaru, but a little less lazy and unkempt, which was exactly what made Shikamaru interesting in the first place. Like, what's interesting about him? I don't know. Metal is just Rock Lee Part 2, although this instance makes a lot more sense when you consider that Lee's role model is Guy, and Guy basically turned Lee into a mini version of himself. So yeah, it's pretty cute here. I understand that this process of taking parents' traits and giving them to kids is a natural decision. It even applies to the original cast. But when I look at these kids, my gut instinct is to view them as walking advertisements of their parents to remind me of how much I love those guys. And they hope that that's enough for my affection to rub off on the kids. The only exceptions being Boruto, Sarada, and Kawaki, who have drama and feelings to sort through. Like, you know, characters in a story would. Maybe the anime does them more justice. I was sticking to the manga, so maybe I'm not giving them a fair shake. I wasn't too interested in the anime. It could never hold my attention because it's basically just mostly slice of life filler, and honestly there are way better slice of life shows. But it seems decent enough at what it's going for, and the animation can be pretty bonkers amazing at times. Two fights in particular being held in high regard by the community. For Dragon Ball Super's anime, it's definitely slower than it needs to be, but the action is definitely far more entertaining in the anime than it is in the manga. But seeing how it has ended, you'll have to read the manga for everything afterwards. But in all likelihood, the anime will return to continue the adaptation someday because remember kids, they can't let a good thing go. Now 100 Years Quest has no anime adaptation or plans for one as far as I can tell, so just read the manga. You may have one big question. Are these series worth reading? The answer is, if you're somebody who would enjoy these series, chances are you're already reading them. These manga are made to cater towards fans of the originals, so if you like Naruto, Dragon Ball, or Fairy Tail, they're worth checking out at the very least. But I can resolutely say I don't highly recommend any of them. I've found things to appreciate, but this whole time I've been fighting the urge to just call this stuff mid. None of these stories are ones I'm really enthusiastic about, outside of their unique disposition as sequels made in part by former assistants. But it can also feel like a ball and chain to some people, I'm sure. Many people feel obligated to read these series, even if they don't like them, just because they love the originals so much and they feel like there's no getting off this train we're on. And that's all folks. Thank you for watching, see you next time, like, sub, you know the drill.